Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Healthwatch South Tees podcast. The aim is to share some stories and information from amazing individuals, community organisations and charities that are making a real difference across Teesside and the wider region. My name is Stephen Liggett, one of the many Healthwatch community champions. I'm a stammerer and I work at South Tees Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust as a research project manager. And I am super lucky to host this podcast with the amazing Vicky Jackson, project coordinator at Healthwatch South Tees. These next two episodes of the podcast really do deserve their own introduction. Over the next two parts of the podcast, we take a deep dive into the IRIS project. IRIS, which stands for Identification and Referral to Improve Safety, is a collaboration between primary care and third sector organisations specialising in domestic abuse. General practice plays an integral role in addressing the issue of and transforming responses to domestic violence and abuse. And as you'll hear in the next two episodes of the podcast, the IRIS programme provides training, support, referral and advocacy to support general practice to better support their patients affected by domestic abuse. This episode is part one, where myself and Vicky chat to Dr. Jen Standen, the clinical lead for IRIS, and in part two, I have the pleasure of speaking to Leanne Smith, the advocate, educator and project lead for IRIS. Throughout the podcast episodes, you'll hear contact details for My Sister's Place, one of the key partners in the IRIS project. You'll also hear more about the work of My Sister's Place. To contact them, you can phone 01642 241 864 or you can email reception@mysistersplace.co.uk. And as you'll hear more from Jen and from Leanne, you can contact your GP surgery or make an appointment with your GP and ask for the IRIS project. I can't thank Jen and Leanne enough for their time in recording this podcast, and we really hope you enjoy these next two episodes. Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Healthwatch South Tees podcast. My name is Stephen Liggett, a community champion with Healthwatch South Tees, and I'm joined as ever by the project coordinator, Vicky Jackson. You all right, Vicky? How's things today?
Yeah, really good. Excited for a different podcast this time, a bit of a special that we've got today.
Totally. So you might have heard this guest on a podcast we did around cervical screening and increasing the awareness of that. So we're delighted to welcome back Jen to the podcast. So for those that didn't hear you on the previous podcast, can you maybe introduce yourself again, Jen, and the programme that you're here to talk about?
Yeah, so my name's Dr. Jen Standen. I'm a GP and I work in Colby Newham at the Parkway Medical Centre in Middlesbrough, and I'm the clinical lead for something called the IRIS programme, and I work with my colleague Leanne Smith, who's a domestic abuse specialist, and we work for My Sister's Place providing the IRIS programme. And this is a specialist programme which aims to support victims and survivors of domestic abuse to access specialist support more easily. So in a nutshell, we go around to GP practices and we provide specialist training for all of the practice staff around identifying abuse and supporting survivors to access that specialist support. Leanne works directly out of practices and in practices for patients to access that support. So instead of patients coming and being signposted to another service, they're actually given a named person who will contact them for support if they would like that. The patient has access to all of the specialist support that My Sister's Place provides, including support around finances, legal support if needed, trauma support, counselling services, and the many things that My Sister's Place do, which Leanne will mention a bit more about later.
GPs in primary care and charity services and organisations in the community tend to be where you can make these interventions.
Yeah, I think it is absolutely, and I think we know that domestic abuse is unfortunately incredibly common, and we know that many of the female or male, whatever gender victims are attending the GP surgeries, perhaps with lots of other things, and it's about us identifying people who are experiencing domestic abuse, and it may be that they're aware that they're experiencing domestic abuse and have barriers to seeking support, or are fearful of what would happen if they seek support. They might have had negative experiences around that in the past, or it may be that people are in a difficult relationship or an unhappy relationship, or have had difficult times in the past in a relationship, and they might not recognise that they're in an abusive relationship, but it's about supporting them around that to recognise whether or not there are elements of abuse in that relationship, and whether or not we can provide support. The support we provide is very much based around what the patient wants. So some of our patients want to just explore their relationship a bit more or talk about their options, but they might not want to take it further. The support we offer is unconditional, so there is no pressure that you need to leave a relationship. You could continue to be in that relationship if that is what you feel you want to do, but we can still provide you that support and be there for you. It may be that you feel it's not the right time, but it's knowing that we're there to support you at a later stage if you want. We think as well with the service that we offer, it works for people of all different ages as well. So sometimes with some of our older patients, we've got victim survivors who have perhaps experienced domestic abuse for 50, 60 years, and they sort of say, well, I've had it for this long, there's nobody that could help me or nothing that I could do. But actually being able to talk about those experiences and seeing if there is support that we can give them is really, really beneficial for those patients. And they've maybe even being aware of My Sister's Place, but thinking, oh, well, that's somewhere for younger women, or that doesn't apply to me. But we're actually saying, whatever your experience is, we can support you, and we do support people in the practice or other locations, whatever's comfortable for that particular patient. We also train the GPs to really think about how people who are experiencing domestic abuse, how they might present in other ways, and about sensitively asking those questions and giving people that safe space to share what they feel able to share whenever or whatever that might be.
You mentioned there that domestic abuse is common, and I was blown away by the percentages of people that actually experience domestic abuse, and almost 80% of survivors do try and seek help from health services, which obviously makes these programs really vital. Where do you see this program developing? Obviously, there must be momentum to maybe support more people of domestic abuse.
Yeah. So when we first started doing the programme in Middlesbrough, we had enough funding for 12 practices. So we approached all practices in Middlesbrough, and we sort of worked with 12 practices who are all fully accredited IRIS practices, and they've gone on to have further training and refresher training. We've trained their new staff when new staff have come. We then had some further funding and were able to increase it up to 15 surgeries. So we've now got 15 IRIS accredited practices. Obviously, we would like to make sure that all practices in Middlesbrough have got access to IRIS support directly through the surgery, and we would like this just to spread out, so it's not just Middlesbrough, but it's all the other areas in the North East. We know that the rates of domestic abuse are incredibly high in Middlesbrough, but they are higher kind of in the North East as well. So it's trying to sort of spread that programme out. I think as well what's sort of quite important to point out is that domestic abuse absolutely does not discriminate, and we have a lot of staff members within the NHS who themselves are either currently or previously have experienced domestic abuse and violence, and they can face additional barriers to trying to seek support. So we do offer IRIS support confidentially to staff who would like that support. So it's just being aware that is there, and again, unfortunately, it is common amongst NHS staff as well.
I think it's really important as well to kind of break down the barriers as to what is domestic abuse as well. I think that, in the past people had, and I think you mentioned it when we were having a conversation, that a sign of domestic abuse, people used to say, bruises would be a sign of domestic abuse. But obviously there's so many more elements to domestic abuse than physical abuse. There's many aspects of it that I suppose we're hearing more and more about in the media now. And have you seen rises in sort of, I know I've heard about like the coercive control and the emotional abuse and that kind of thing, and identifying that as well must be more tricky than if there is a physical sort of evidence that you'd see as a medical professional.
Yeah, I mean, I think a coercive control is present in the vast majority of the abusive relationships that are kind of there. And the problem with coercive control is it's very subtle, it's repeated, and when you're in that relationship, it's very difficult to see. And sometimes because of the way that perpetrators manipulate things, it's very difficult for people on the outside to see as well. Yeah. And that's sometimes the first step, and that's sort of present throughout, and then other elements of domestic abuse can come in and go out. Yeah. So sometimes we see, for example, around physical abuse, people speak to victim survivors who say, oh, well, the relationship's not as bad now because they used to hit me but they don't now. But actually, by hitting them all that time ago, they've got that fear and that control. So it is still just as bad in that sense. I mean, I think we're seeing a lot more around kind of honour-based abuse coming through, but as well tech abuse particularly is kind of through the roof at the moment. So we've got perpetrators using Ring doorbells to monitor, putting cameras, bugs on cars, using Alexa devices to try and work out what people are doing to control their movements, and using sort of social media in general. So I think that's another area that's really increasing. Economic abuse, so people controlling people's finances with a lot of benefits. Sometimes the benefit is provided to the household, and the perpetrator might hold on to the benefit and not actually share that with the other partner. So there are so many different forms, unfortunately, of abuse that are being utilised against victims. And with the IRIS training, usually when people are experiencing different things, whether it be coercive control or other abuse, it does have an effect on them, and it might affect their health. It may increase their anxiety, it may cause their mental health to suffer, it may cause physical problems to get worse. So what we're kind of doing is we're training GPs to say, look, this person's struggling with anxiety, or this physical problem's getting worse. Is there something else going on for this person at home that they maybe don't feel able to share? Or if we ask about it, if we open that kind of conversation, it might be that they feel able to discuss something, or it might be that they're not sure whether they are in a domestic abusive relationship, but they would like to talk to our specialist to just explore that relationship a bit more.
How long has it been, the programme been in Middlesbrough now?
Yeah, it started running since the beginning of 2021. Yeah. So we were still in the grasps of the pandemic. So we did a lot of the initial training online, but thankfully we've now moved back to face-to-face as it was intended, which I think is much better for those group discussions around things.
And I think that's where we first heard about it as a Healthwatch. Jen was actually nominated for one of our Star Awards from a person who had been supported through the programme, and it was just amazing to hear about what was being done in our local area. So how many people have been supported? Do you know numbers and since that point?
Yeah,
then,
so a lot. So we're kind of heading sort of rapidly towards the 400 referral mark, which is a lot of patients. And we know, so prior to Iris, if patients had kind of disclosed their experienced domestic abuse, the kind of standard practice was to give them a card to ring My Sister's Place or Harbour, whichever organisation. But the thing is, for a victim survivor, it's like sharing it again, and that uncertainty about what that looks like. Sometimes people put the card away or don't take the card, and then it doesn't happen. And then as GPs as well, we don't know whether that person ever accessed that support. Whereas with Iris, because we're doing that referral, obviously if they want us to, we're doing that referral for them. We're explaining the kind of background, so they're not having to go through and explain it, or that when Leanne sees them, she already knows kind of the background that we've shared, so she's not having to go back to scratch with that. So I think that works much better than what we had before. And even before we did the project, there were very, very low numbers from health of actual referrals into My Sister's Place, whereas it's now gone through the roof now that we're directly referring through the Iris programme. But as well with Iris, we've got patients who've perhaps sought support a couple of years ago through Iris, and then they might have decided to stay in the relationship, or they might have gotten back with their partner, or they might be in a new relationship and be struggling, and they're coming back and they're asking for Iris again. So we're able to sort of provide that continuity and support, really, which I think is really, really positive.
Yeah, and in terms of the longevity of being able to run the programme, is that how long is it? Where it would be great if, like you say, all of the practices in Middlesbrough and even to sort of extend. Obviously, we cover South Tees. What does that look like now?
And I think one of the challenges, it's the same across the country. Money is tight for all organisations, the NHS as well, and unfortunately it does involve funding. Up until now, we've been working. So our champions, the Community Safety Partnership and the council have been absolute champions. We've been working with the PCC as well. So we've had champions that have been helping us find that funding and that support. And My Sister's Place have provided funding themselves, and also have sought funding over and over again to try and support this programme and keep it going, this project. And I think we want it to be sustained, because if the programme doesn't run, it's people's knowledge and awareness will drop down again. People will start just handing out cards, and we won't get these referrals through. The hidden victims will stay hidden, and we want this to continue, because it is making such a difference to people's lives. And I think a lot we do get feedback sometimes from patients, and there are several times where they will say, I've known about domestic abuse services, but I never thought they were for me. I would never have got this support. And we hear that message time and time again, and that is why it is so important to identify people who experience domestic abuse and offer them support that works for them in their circumstances.
Yeah, and I think the fact that people are going for their medical appointments, it's not like going to a separate venue, is it, or directly going there. It's so important, isn't it? I know when we've been doing just some work just with people who are unidentified carers, and to get people to actually speak about their experiences of that, they will go to the GP because they have to have their own medical appointments, or they're taking somebody, they might be taking a person with them. So it's so important.
It's so important. And I think that we know that we've talked about kind of older patients, but also patients who live with disability or at increased risk of experiencing domestic abuse and sexual abuse, and sometimes they may have less opportunities to talk to professionals about what they're experiencing, and sometimes their carers may go with them to appointments, and that can create that additional barriers if their carer is actually a perpetrator. So Iris is about supporting patients who have barriers to describing or explaining their experiences. It's about breaking down those barriers so we can support them.
Yeah, great.
Obviously GPs and GPs staff do fantastic job anyway, and it's rewarding. But for me personally, it would be if you got that training and you're making like not an intervention yourself, but you're signposting or referring, you could actually just change someone's like the course of their life. The rewards from the staff must be unbelievable as well.
They are, and I think that's one of the advantages of Iris as well, is that we do, with the patient's permission, we do get feedback. So in terms of Leanne will feed, if the patient consents, we'll feedback, being able to support this person with this, or this is what the person found helpful. So we know what's happening with that patient, and we do get a lot of feedback from patients as well. And we have had patients who have told us that Iris has literally saved their life, and that is really quite powerful to hear. And they talk about like the incredible job that Leanne has done sort of working with them, and we do get a lot of positive feedback in that. I think
as well, you mentioned to me earlier that it's not just women either who can get support. I think it's really important that people absolutely understand that, you know, it could be anybody experiencing.
Absolutely. So we have measles. So Iris, the Iris program nationally is a program which is designed to support female victims and survivors, and that's based on the fact that we know that domestic abuse disproportionately affects women. So that is why that program is set up, and it's based on an evidence-based program and a lot of research, and so it is a female referral program. However, with our Iris program in Middlesbrough, regardless of what your gender is, you can be referred through Iris, and we have another domestic abuse specialist worker who will work with male victims and survivors of domestic abuse as well. So we refer all patients through the Iris program, and they'll be assigned the best worker to support them on that journey.
Yeah, thank you.
Last question, probably, because I know time's getting on. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, Jen. But what made you get involved with this? What was your journey into getting involved with such an amazing program?
I have had a lot of experience supporting people close to me who've been in domestic abusive relationships, and I felt for a while that there's been a kind of a gap. I've been very aware of the domestic abuse services, but I think there's been a gap in terms of accessing support. But I've also myself had quite sort of negative experiences sometimes going through healthcare, with the way things have been phrased, with the way things have been asked, and I've sort of reflected on how difficult it must be for a survivor to disclose. So I've talked about during my pregnancies being asked kind of about domestic abuse with my partner present. I was told that they got to the domestic abuse section and said, we're not going to ask you about domestic abuse because you're a doctor, so you'd know all about that. So again, that's incredibly that puts that barrier for that doctor who could well be experiencing domestic abuse. It, like I've said before, it can affect anyone. So I've had those negative experiences myself, but also I've had a lot of years working and supporting with patients through the work that I do, and I hear the same stories over and over again about perhaps them experiencing this and nobody ever asking the question, or asking the question in the right way, or feeling like they were just given a card and not feeling able to kind of progress that. Or also I hear people talk about, well, I can't access that support because and there's a lot of barriers for victims and survivors to seek support and to continue support, and it's about trying to help practices to understand those barriers, to support people, and making sure that victims and survivors remain autonomous. We need to move away from this kind of the previous culture we've had that somebody must seek help and must do this and must do that, because we're just doing what the perpetrator's doing to them. We're just reinforcing that message, which isn't right. So it's but it's basically through the experiences that I've had in my personal life, but also with regards to patients as well, and the journey we've been on. And I think doing the Iris program, the more we do, the more we learn, the more I know how important this is.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's okay.
That's kind of those are the discussions and powerful kind of conversations that will spread awareness of that. And thank you so much for your time.
You are very welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Stephen.
Once again, thank you so much to Jen and to Leanne for taking the time to record this podcast and for setting up and running such a transformational program that is really helping and improving the lives of so many people across Teesside. Those contact details for My Sister's Place again. You can call them on 01642 241 864 or email reception@mysistersplace.co.uk. If contacting My Sister's Place directly isn't an option, then please speak to your GP surgery if you would like a referral to Iris. If you are a GP practice or work in primary care and would like to become more aware of domestic abuse or simply for more information on Iris, please contact Leanne, the Iris Advocate Educator, via email at leanne.smith@mysistersplace.co.uk. Please get in touch if you have any feedback. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and see you soon.